podcast is brought to you by Fireside.fm. Podcast hosting by podcasters for podcasters. Now on to the episode.
Welcome to today's episode of Vibing with AI Code. Today we're going to focus in on how do you get better designs out of AI. We've all kind of seen those generic or like default layouts that AI likes to use. I don't even want to call it slop because it's not even necessarily the slop part of it. It's just the fact that right now, if you tell any model to do some sort of design or just like build a site, it's going to be pretty similar from the colors and things like that. So Baird's done a good job, I think, recently working on some of this stuff. And I'm going to throw it over to you just kind of to kick it off. I know you got some stuff to demo for us and how to improve this.
Yeah, definitely. And, a lot of this started for me, Claude Design just came out about a month ago or so. And that definitely improved the output of AI in design. But I don't know if you've seen it, but there's so many sites now and so many like pieces of AI design that now look like Claude Design versus,
Yep.
the Tailwind default, which is what I'd call the design when you
Yeah.
left it.
Right. Yeah. It's like a new level of similarity or
Yeah,
like default
it's
design.
The baseline has gotten higher, but it still is just like it all looks so similar. And so
Yeah, I think, you and I talked about the stuff you'd been doing like this a little bit last week. And I want to say like the word that probably fits this best is making it a little bit more bespoke, right? Like, how do you get back to making it feel like a person designed it? Because in a lot of ways, like that's the goal here. We don't want the AI to make all the decisions, but we also want to trust the AI to at least know what to do with some of the guidance that we give it, right?
Yeah, it's all about intentionality to me. And from an AI perspective, it's how do you still have that intentionality, but not have to execute completely on your own. And so, we can jump right in. And so kind of the place I started was, I had built a personal site about I don't know, it was maybe 2 years ago at this point. And recently,
real quick, was that with or without AI at that point?
That was actually pre-AI. It was like right before AI got good enough to do it. I think I did like a revision of it with AI, but recently I was like, I'm not really happy with where it was looking, and I can actually pull that up right now. So, this is my current site, and it's not or actually I shouldn't even say current. I've already pushed the new one live, but this was my old site that I hand did, and it's not a terrible looking website, but there, I have a decent design sense, but I'm not what you would call a traditional designer. And so it's really, in my mind, I was like, how can I make this better, but not have to be, super involved because I'm already busy. So trying to redo my website and having to do it completely by hand, it just takes more time than I'm usually willing to put in. And so,
and just back to the stuff we talked about at the top, it's like, sure, either one of us, because I felt the same way. Like I haven't even built a personal site in a long time. And I could easily go, and we both could have just gone straight to Claude and said, build me a site. But this is, this is supposed to be your portfolio in a lot of ways, even if you're not a designer. So you do want it to be more unique, right? So that's probably a lot what you're thinking as well, I would guess.
Yeah, exactly. And so they'd kind of been in the back of my mind for a while. And then one day, I just see design inspiration, whether it's on LinkedIn or a bunch of other places that I look at. And so I come across this site, which I really like Swiss design and like kind of the minimal grid-based design. And so this looked really cool to me. And I was like, what if I tried to do my portfolio like this? And I kind of challenged myself. It wasn't like hey, I want to rip this off and just have AI do it exactly like this. I was like, I wonder if I could, instead of like jumping into Claude Design, which, Claude Design is very much around skills, like they have the front end design skill, which Anthropic created. And I think that's like the core of how that product works. And then they actually create like custom skills for you for your system. And I'm like, I wonder, instead of just like throwing it all into Claude Design, can I just do that directly through, kind of a combination? You could probably do it directly through Claude Code, but I was like, let's jump into just Claude Chat first. And so I really just gave it the link and asked it to obviously not copy it, but like extract a system out of it, extract the patterns, because I'm not a classically trained designer. So it's like, what are the things that make this design what it is? And like I said, it's definitely Swiss, which is a big reference for it. And like I've had a lot of experience with that with the people I've worked with in the past. So I know a lot about it, but I had the AI first like deconstruct what that even looks like from a systematic perspective. And so you can see it kind of called it out. And then I actually told it to create a skill using that system first. And it goes through and actually creates some example layouts just to show you what it's thinking. You can kind of keep pushing it if you want to. And then it actually comes out creating a skill for you. And so looking at that real quick, it just gives you the color system, typography system, grid system, like all the things that are kind of the building blocks. And so from there, I was able to take that over to Claude Code and just execute the skill on my website. And it actually went through and redesigned it. And this is what we ended up with, just kind of running it through. And again, like this took me maybe a day of playing around with. And like this wasn't even the first shot of the skill. Like I had it run it. And then I tweaked it. I refined it. I actually made it more what I wanted it to be. But it's that first take that you get when you kind of go through, you find what you like, you run it through AI to extract those patterns, create that skill, have it take a first pass at it, and then you iterate on it. It's a lot like what we talked about with code in the past too, is like you're never going to get the right thing the first time. But if you get it far enough and then you iterate, like you can actually add that intentionality into it.
Yeah, that's really cool. And you already answered one of my questions, which was, was this the first shot? You already said it wasn't, but I'm kind of curious because I've done some design stuff with Claude and also without.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
I most of what I've built with Claude that at least has UI is like so basic. I don't really care. I'm using it myself right
Yep.
now. So
For
I'm
sure.
not pushing back. So I'm kind of curious, like with this skill and getting, at least a baseline out of the box that you wanted, what does the iteration process look like at that point? Are you actually editing the skill? Are you just working with Claude like normal at that point?
I think you can do both. I The way I would approach it is iterate outside of the skill first. So it's like once you have the design, the skill is more like executing the system, not necessarily the design itself. So it's like it informs the design. But I think it's kind of a twofold thing where if it's something like, oh, I want to change, content or some of the structural things, like, I want a different style button or something like that, iterate on that first. And then once you get to the end of something and you're liking it, then you can again like create that cycle. So you then update the skill to fit where you got the system to through that iteration process. So I mean it really, everything right now is about agent loops and
Right.
session loops for AI. It's the same for design. It just, in my mind, you need more human intervention to really like have that taste and have that intentionality to it of like, I want it to look like this, or that's looking pretty good, but it needs to get pushed further. And like, I iterated on things like color. I iterated on things like fonts. I, had it choose different fonts and kind of played with that. And, I was doing some design stuff at work and found a font I liked there. So I brought that in. And so it really can be, I mean, obviously, if you like it, you let it go. But if you don't, or if there's pieces you don't like, I think it's kind of that human AI augmentation then, where it's like you truly can go in and get your hands dirty. But to your point, I think at the end of the day, you then pull that back out into the skill, especially if you're planning on like, if I was going to blow my site out to be, bring in a blog or bring in other pages, you really want to make sure that skill gets pulled out and updated so that it takes in all the system that you put together as you go.
Yep. Got it. Cool.
And I'll say, another thing that, obviously this was kind of a bigger example of like, hey, I've got a site that I like and I want to go work from that perspective. That's one way to do it. The other thing I would say, if you just want to be like, I want my design to look better, but I don't want it to go through all that effort, there's a couple different places you can start. And front end design, like the skill that Anthropic created, is one good place to start. And you can see it's not radically different than what I showed before. It does give you like the design thinking, what are the themes, typography, aesthetics in general. And it's just really just like giving the AI a place to start that isn't your default. I will say front end design now is getting to be more like, if you just jump into Claude Design, I'm pretty sure this is like the foundation of what they're running there.
Okay.
But another one I ran into recently that's been interesting is one called Impeccable. And this one, you actually have a whole suite of commands to it. Let me see if they show them here. Again, it does all the typical design stuff, but in here you can actually do things like have it critique. Where's critique? It's somewhere in here. That doesn't matter. But you can have it like critique your design, and it'll actually go in and say like, how close is this to a typical AI website? So it'll actually do some critique on the design, but then you can also like do an audit. You can have it build stuff on it. You can then have it like do those iteration loops of like polish as you go, and it'll polish certain features. And this is kind of a, after you get your feet wet, if you really want to start pushing on this further, this is a good place to go next of how can you almost learn the design process a little bit as you go through this, because it has it very well pulled out in terms of like how you can approach it, how you can think of it. And it gives you a lot of interesting information about it. So it's really kind of that laddering up, which again, we've talked about this type of stuff so much where, AI by default is interesting, but the more you can add like the right context and the right skills and those types of things, and your taste, intuition, and your thinking, putting that all together, you can get past the AI default and get to something that is more what you actually want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. And that, to your point there at the end, just reminds me of something I've been thinking about a lot. And even just, I saw a YouTube video, I think it was, where the person in the video was just talking about how the Anthropic team, at least, and I would imagine it's the same with OpenAI, I just haven't seen any videos on it, but they are layering skills to actually write the code, and they're not just using prompts. And to me, this is like the same idea, except it's obviously design focused. And that makes a lot of sense because these models are very smart. We know that.
Oh, for sure.
But just like a person that's working with you, whether it's AI or not, if you give it very vague idea of what to do, it's going to give you kind of vague generic output. It's not going to really know what to work with. So yeah, this is really cool. The Impeccable one here, this one, who's this one from?
That's a good question. I think it actually just is a company or a person that's kind of created the system.
Okay, but so it's in the skills
directory.
So
if you go to skills.sh, you can find, both of these skills, obviously, but it's got like all the skills out there. So,
cool.
So yeah,
we'll link to it too. So
yep, for sure. And I'm sure there's a ton of other ones that do similar things. Like most skills, it's like everybody's got their own version of it. But the fun thing is that you can, to your point of layering skills, you can put these things inside of your custom skill as well. So be like, use this skill as you're doing it so that you don't even need to necessarily start with Impeccable or front end design. You start with your custom skill and just tell it what it needs to do with these tools to actually make it repeatable. And so, skills, obviously everybody's using skills these days, but they are really powerful to create these composable ways to add these layers of more custom stuff on top of that default.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Cool. Was there anything else you wanted to share around this?
Yeah, I'll say the one other thing I did just, obviously I just showed you one design and maybe that was just a fluke of getting something that was pretty decent pretty quickly. And so we've got our website. And so wanted to do a quick test because we were working on thumbnails and like, how can we push our thumbnails to a more consistent place? And so I had built thumbnails working with Claude and just doing some design work, and we were liking that thought. And so it's like, hey, let me try just taking that instead of like another website and giving that to the AI and working with it. And again, this was not even a day's worth of work. And we went from something that, this site, there's nothing wrong with it, but it was one shot. It was a typical one shot AI generation, and it does
Yep.
the job, but it definitely doesn't feel like it was intentionally crafted. It
Yeah,
feels
in
like,
fact, I can even speak to that really quick since I did it initially. Like, I think all I did was basically give it some colors and say,
yep,
"Hey, we want to show the YouTube videos and we want to show the podcasts," right? So
yep,
it was pretty straightforward. I didn't expect much. To your point, it was
yeah,
fairly generic. It did avoid the purple and black common
yeah,
from
for sure.
AI only because I told it, "Hey, I want these colors."
Yep, yeah, exactly. But going from there to, just running it through the process we just talked about, we get to something where these are the new thumbnails that we put together, and you're just starting to add some more design elements like the pixelation and some of these eyebrow things. And it just, again, this isn't anything crazy, but it just makes it a little bit more intentional, a little bit more ownable versus just doing something that you don't take any time putting in. And again, like, sometimes you don't need to. Sometimes it's like we just need to build something quick and get it out there, and that's totally fine. But when you want to kind of keep pushing things, the awesome part about it is this doesn't take a lot of time. As long as you have these patterns to start using, you can start doing better design without actually having to learn to be a designer. You have to know what looks good, at least what you want to look good. And then you just work with the AI like you do with anything and figure out, using skills is definitely the way to go with it. But it's also just having that little bit of seed to start pushing it, and you can get it outside of the AI default pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah, that's really cool to see, and I know you're gonna probably keep using this stuff a lot, so maybe at some point we can share more of the designs we've
Yeah,
been doing, but for now, this is really cool. Thanks for sharing it.
yeah, definitely.
Um, yeah, so, I mean, one thing that we've just been thinking about, I know if you've watched some of our other episodes, we sometimes we'll talk about other things and we'll have other topics. Sometimes we'll focus in on one topic. But for now, we're going to try doing more focused episodes here. So we're going to cover design like we just did. Maybe next time we'll add some other things, like maybe we'll talk about some news stuff. But really quick, I guess, because it was a big thing that did drop just recently, I did want to check in really quickly. Have you used Fable at all?
Fable.
Yep.
I actually used Fable a little bit yesterday. So I came across a skill, since we're talking about skills. Somebody had created a skill, I think it was like efficient Fable or something like that. That,
Okay.
because I mean, Fable is 2x higher than Opus for usage.
Yep.
So
Right.
on the $20 a month plan, it's like 2 minutes worth of Fable and you're out. And so, but this guy was talking about the fact that this skill uses Fable as the like big decision maker and like big planner, and then it hands off to Haiku and Sonnet to do all the actual grunt work. And supposedly it does a really good job. And the plan that I got out of Fable when I was planning a new feature for something I'm working on looked interesting. It's just I ran out of usage again pretty quickly with it,
Yep.
and so I didn't get to see the full, you know, end goal, end output from it, and so I can't speak too much for it. Have you played with it at all?
I actually haven't had a chance to yet. And I guess for me, I'm just not exactly sure what I want to throw at it. It's like Opus 4, well, basically ever since 4.6, has
Yep.
been good enough and has been doing the things. And I
Yeah.
even go to Sonnet sometimes.
Sure.
And again, with like the skills and things we were just talking about earlier, like I don't feel like I really need much. Now, obviously, there are
Yeah.
big, meaty problems that maybe it would make sense to
Oh,
throw
for
to
sure.
Fable. I just don't have that right now. So it's
Yeah.
interesting, but in some ways it's almost more interesting not what the model's doing, but just the pricing and how it
Yeah.
does feel like this is, and we had a whole episode about how things are getting
Yeah.
expensive. This is just another inflection point, it feels like, where
Yeah.
now there's going to be major differentiation on like how much you're going to even use the new models versus
Yeah.
the quote unquote older models.
Yeah. No, and it is an interesting, and like, things have changed even since we talked last, because things were expensive and it was getting hard to run. And then, Anthropic signed their deal with SpaceX for the
Yep.
Colossus data center. And now I actually am struggling to use all of my usage just on basic usage right now. And to be fair, I've been doing more manual stuff that I can't automate as easily. So I haven't been pushing it as hard, but I definitely have seen an improvement there. But
Same
to your
here.
point, seeing how they're going to change the Fable pricing after the first 2 weeks so that it is extra usage. So essentially, like you can use the API or it's extra usage on your subscription.
Yep.
I think we are going to get to a point where Fable and those level models are going to be either the big companies can use them or they're not going to be your daily driver. They're not going to be your most of what you're doing because I don't think you need it.
Right.
When you really
Yep.
boil it down, and this is actually a test I did that I forgot to mention, is the first site I showed, that my personal site, I
Mm-hmm.
used Claude Code fully for that.
Okay.
For the actual R site, I actually used Devon, which is now what Windsurf is. Windsurf just changed over from Windsurf to Devon, so now it's like the Devon IDE. Pretty much
Okay.
the same thing. That's kind of a side tangent, but I actually used their adaptive model where it chooses the right model and ran through the same processes just with a different model. And what I'm getting at there is just that I'm noticing more that when you have these skills and the right like framework, and I mean it's even to the harness layer around it, the model doesn't matter as much. If you've got the right system around it, the model, even Sonnet's smart enough to do most of what you need it to. And so
Yep.
I really do think we're getting to that inflection point of like these bigger models are going to be for, like you say, the meatier things like, and I think you already see a lot of it with like the Mythos stuff is security. That's going to be a huge one, both people trying to hack into things, but also people trying to secure things. And so it's really going to start, I think, fragmenting a lot more.
Yep. All right, cool. Yeah, I just thought I would check in on that quick.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for watching and listening. Show notes will be down below. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, and definitely check out Apple Podcasts if you want to give us a 5-star rating. That'd be great. That would really help get more followers. And yeah, we'll see you next time.